Good morning, everyone. Before we officially start the agenda, I wanted to thank you all for remotely joining us for today's virtual meeting of the Texas Alcoholic Beverage Commission. For those of you who've never joined us either in person or certainly virtually, which is new, I'm Kevin Lilly and I'm chairman of the commission. No doubt you've seen and heard much since the beginning of COVID-19 about the TABC's efforts to enforce Governor Abbott's executive orders and the state's health protocols. Some of these efforts have drawn more headlines than others. Requiring businesses to remain closed or change the way they do business is not a duty that we take lightly. Some of these efforts have continued to draw headlines, and all of us at TABC recognize the hardships nearly every member of the alcoholic beverage industry is experiencing during this pandemic. We do not want to see businesses shut down or struggle. It pains us to see this. However, the number one priority of TABC and our governor is keeping the people of Texas safe. Public safety is a priority and will continue to be a priority. If we can't work together to reduce the spread of COVID-19, our state's economy simply cannot reopen. That's why TABC is working with our governor as well as local health and safety authorities across the state to help businesses follow the executive orders and guidelines intended to protect our most vulnerable populations from the coronavirus. Please know we're finding ways to help industry. Just last week, TABC issued an update on the guidance for manufacturing tier members seeking to sell alcohol for on-premise consumption. We're constantly discussing new policies that could further clarify operating guidelines for businesses across the state. First and foremost, I want each of you to know that we're listening. Your ideas, your comments, your concerns are critical in our deliberations. Please maintain those lines of communications with us and so that we can work together to end this situation. Finally, I ask each and every member of the alcohol industry to protect yourselves, your employees, your customers by voluntarily following the current health guidelines. This pandemic is temporary, but we can't guarantee future success unless all Texans can be assured that the risk has passed. And so this has been a tough time for all of us. It's been a tough time for your families, your children, elderly relatives. It's been a tough time for your businesses. It's continually a moving target, and we in the TABC have often been in the spotlight. But I, again, want to assure you that everyone in this agency, from the top all the way down, are absolutely committed to helping businesses to reopen responsibly. And we're asking for and have received your support and your cooperation. And I am very proud of the industry and the feedback that they've given us. So we thank you for your patience. I know it's a tough time. And I'd like to, at this time, open up to my fellow commissioners, starting with Commissioner Boatwright. I know you've got a few words about a tragic event that occurred over the weekend, a senseless crash that appears to have ties to drunk driving. So I'd like to begin with Commissioner Boatwright, and then any of our other commissioners that would like to make comments, please do so. So Commissioner Boatwright.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll start by just addressing members of the industry. I know how hard this time has been. It's affected my business too, my legal practice. It's been horrible for everyone, and I just want industry members to know that we're doing everything we can to stop the spread of COVID-19 and get everybody back to work. Those are dual commitments that we have that we take extremely seriously. And the sooner we get all this behind us, the better it'll be for absolutely everybody. And I want to thank everyone for their patience and their understanding as we work through this truly terrible situation. It's the first thing I wanted to say. And then second, I wanted to say a couple of words about a patriot, public servant, and friend who was killed by a drunk driver this past weekend. Justice David Bridges served our country in the United States Army. He served our state in a number of capacities, including as a trial court judge and as a justice on the Court of Appeals. He was a very, very good man. He was a very good judge. And when we say the pledges of allegiance in a few minutes, I hope that we'll remember public servants and friends like Justice Bridges, who have been the victims of terrible tragedies. And I hope that we can all remember people like him as we try to limit things like drunk driving and the horrible consequences that flow from it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Boatwright. Our condolences go to his family and friends, and we're obviously saddened by these tragedies that occur all too often. So thank you for sharing that insight and your perspective. Any other commissioners that would like to share some thoughts before we begin? Having heard none, then we will begin, and please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, the next agenda item is the approval of commission meetings minutes of the May 19th, 2020 meeting. I so move. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Moreno. We have a second. We'll now vote. And the,
We're waiting on Commissioner Atkins.
okay. So understand those who are joining us for the first time, we have a board books vote process. If there's any kind of glitch in the system, we'll simply do a voice vote.
Commissioner Atkins, would you like me to record your vote?
All right, we have an approval and we have a second. I will now take a voice vote. All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, having heard none, minutes are approved as written. Our votes have been recorded. Okay, at this time, the next agenda item will be an update on the agency's Academy Training Division. Director Salinas.
Good morning, Chairman Lilly. Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Orlando Salinas. I'm the Director of the Training Division. I'm also retired Brigadier General. I'm honored to be here with you today and thank you for the kind words of all our service members who served today and all our first responders. So it's an exciting time to be with TABC, and I'd like to do two things. One, talk a little bit about a human trafficking investigative program that we're about to do. It's a 3-week program, and we'll get into it during the slide presentation. And to give you a small update as to a very successful academy that we ran and graduated. May I go to the next slide, please? So with your permission, General Nettles, I won't read the slide. I'll just go through some highlights and salient points. I'd like to draw your attention to the very last bullet. On July the 2nd at 10 a.m., via a virtual graduation, we had Representative Calcasel as a keynote speaker. I'd like to just point out as a point of personal privilege, sir, that thanks to the hard work and leadership of General Nettles and the staff, we were able to graduate all 25 cadets. We had a virtual graduation and we did not have any issues with COVID or the pandemic. So they're all currently at their duty stations, and with the help of Deputy Executive Director Sines, they're all gainfully employed. So it was a very successful academy done amid the COVID pandemic, and all the 25 new agents are currently on the job and working, and we're very, very proud of them. So appreciate your support, sir, your leadership, and we continue to do great things. If I may go to the next slide, please. Sir, this is the next program that I'd like to visit with you all on. We got tired of calling everything an academy, and originally we had started with a SIU academy that was a 3-week program. We've decided to do a human trafficking investigative program. It's a 3-week long specialized training event that focuses on undercover operations in human trafficking. The targeted population for this would be some of our special investigation agents, and they'll be identified to attend this 3 weeks academy. On the bottom of this slide, sir, and commissioners, you've seen these pictures before. It's at Relish campus. We will be using their gym, their shoot house, their ranges, and the emergency vehicle operations, which was very successful for us in this last academy. So we'll still continue to use some of them. Our relationships with TEEX and Relish continues to grow. And sir, on a personal note, I'd like to let you know that they asked for a copy of our virtual graduation because they were looking to do the same thing. So TABC continues to do great things. May I go to the next slide, please? So a little bit about this program, very specialized program, and what makes this different. And I'd like to draw your attention to a couple of the highlights. One, it's going to be focusing on report writing. How do we do human trafficking report writing, undercover operations report writing? But most importantly, what makes us different than any other law enforcement agency is you'll see to the right-hand side, we have some what we would call subject matter experts. Allison Franklin currently has several videos, worked with the governor's office. We have Nick Nicolas Gutierrez, who is a former TABC agent, works for TABC and was assigned to the FBI task force. And we have Antonio Gracia, who is with a detective with the Houston PD. And we have hired these to be our subject matter experts. So the reason this is important is that for the first time, our slant, our take on human trafficking is to really identify a victim's perspective. A survivor's perspective. So Allison has done great work with us. At the very end, at the end state, you'll see not only the perspective, the point of view, but we found out that there's actually a cycle on how they get recruited into this human trafficking. And we're trying to learn more about their glossary, words they use, terminologies they use, what their culture is. Allison is helping with that. She's also helping us produce a small video that gives us a perspective of the victim and what she's gone through and how she was able to get out of there, and what we as a law enforcement agency should focus in on as we try to help not only rescue them, but long-term aftercare. We can go to, and that's really week 1 type of focus. So we'll go to the next slide. So on week 2, sir, a couple of things that I'd like to highlight here is one, really have a firm understanding on the human trafficking laws. And how do we successfully prosecute these cases? Therefore, we will be bringing in assistant district attorney and a assistant U.S. attorney to provide insight on how we prepare and prosecute human trafficking cases. We also want to highlight how we work with our non-governmental organizations, such as the Child Advocacy Center, the Safe Alliance. What this will do is help us provide a continuum of care for our survivors, our victim survivors, that we can make sure that we're doing the right things for them. So on week 3, and we're excited about this, it's really a practical-based application of all the skills that they've learned in the prior 2 weeks. So it's a real-world scenario where they're able to evaluate all the knowledge and skills that they've learned over the past 2 weeks in the Bryan College Station area and at Relish campus that will result in a culmination of their learning activities. Next slide. So I'm happy to report that during our academy and with the help and support of the Deputy Executive Director of Science and General Nettles, I had asked them to be able to, we wrote a PT, a physical readiness training program. And not only did we write the program, but we actually executed it during the academy. And one of the benefits of this was this is intended to have, we put together a physical fitness readiness manual that we can share with the law enforcement division. And what it did is it yielded a 20% increase in VO2. VO2, of course, is the maximal oxygen intake, sir, and it's considered the gold standard on how we measure fitness and wellness, physical fitness and wellness. So the Concept 2 rower is currently the testing venue for the PRTs, the physical readiness tests that they have to go through. We have these documents and the manuals ready. We're ready to distribute them over to the law enforcement division, and we believe that the follow-on to this will be that if an agent is needing some help with either role protocol or physical fitness, they'll be able to use our manual with the law enforcement division to help agents improve their physical and overall physical fitness events and training, not only for the law enforcement entity, sir, but also for our non-law enforcement entity. So this manual exists for everyone who wants to try to do a fitness type of program. Next slide, please. So I'm most excited about this. We are in collaboration with the Texas State Guard, the military department. We are putting together a chaplaincy program. Now, during the academy, we had a Texas State Guard chaplain and a Texas Parks and Wildlife chaplain who once a week were working with our cadets, or now new agents, and they were helping them through some issues as they had family separation. It came upon us that we all decided that it would be a great idea, and with the guidance of General Nettles, we decided that doing an agency-wide chaplaincy program. We decided to partner with the Texas Military Department, the Texas State Guard. They currently have several chaplains in different geographic areas, so that allows us to connect with them and to provide an extra level of help. This in no way supplants the EAP, the Employee Assistance Program. But what this does is gives us more venues to try to help not only our law enforcement, but our employees and their families. It's a multi-dimensional, non-denominational approach, but what this does is gives us another tool in our tool bag to help families and employees as they continue through some hard times or going through some stressful events. So we're pretty excited, sir. It's going through our review process. We have the manual ready. It's going through the Texas Military Department review process. We don't see any showstoppers, and hopefully we'll be able to start this very soon. I'm happy to report that within the academy, we had several of our cadets who not only used our state chaplains, but continue to work with our chaplains even after the academy. So it's been a very successful program. Sir, next slide. Mr. Lilly, Chairman Lilly, and Commissioners and General Nettles, subject to your questions, that would conclude my portion of this briefing.
Thank you, General. I appreciate your update on the Academy. I'd also like to make a comment to the individuals that are participating. We have 350 participants, many of which have never attended a meeting. Now, this is a commission meeting. This is not a public, this is a public forum, but we follow a strict protocol because we have a lot of business to discuss during these quarterly meetings. Also, I think people need to understand the bifurcated nature of our agency. While we are a regulatory agency, we are also a law enforcement agency. Our primary law enforcement mission is to eradicate human trafficking from all licensed establishments. This is a blight on humanity. And while we have COVID-19 going on, and there are issues affecting everyone, we still cannot move away from our primary law enforcement mission to eradicate this crime, which is continuing to go on. So if people are asking why we are talking about human trafficking and why we are not talking about COVID-19, that's because we have many other issues that we have to deal with as an agency, and this is the forum in which we do that. To update the commissioners on what we're doing at the Academy, to train our law enforcement agents is an important factor. So I appreciate your patience, but this is part of our mission, and it will continue to be part of our mission. And I will also say that the TABC right now is one of the largest agencies in the state as far as commitment to human trafficking. The number of agents that we have committed to undercover operations is larger than any law enforcement agency in the state. So it's something that we deal with on a daily basis and will continue to do so. So we appreciate everyone's patience as we go through this, but this is business that we have to deal with. And so I thank you for all your comments as we continue. At this point, we are going to move to the next agenda, which is agent demographics and use of force, which has obviously been something that's been in the media a great deal over the last 3 weeks. And so Deputy Executive Director Sines, would you please give us an update? Thank you.
Yes, good morning, Chairman Lilly, Commissioners. Yes, I am here to speak today about agent demographics and use of force. As you know, We've had some very unfortunate incidents recently in the law enforcement world across the nation. And I will speak to some of what TABC is doing to try to mitigate some of those instances from occurring within this agency. First of all, I'm going to speak a little bit about agent ethnicity. So next slide, Joe. Our agent ethnicity overall, I'm not gonna run through these for a very long time, but you can see that this is a breakdown for agent ethnicity overall for the entire enforcement division. As you can see, we're with the two larger demographics being white and Hispanic. The right illustrates the most recent hires that were just graduated our academy. As you can tell, the recruitment by our human resources division, which we are continually trying to recruit and retain some of the better candidates that we can get. So TABC's enforcement shows that we're working to try to get to this diversity. However, some of the challenges, of course, are going to be pay, civilian perception of law enforcement today, the actual work environment, and the working of many nights and weekends and some holidays. So those are always going to be a challenge for law enforcement. But within this agency, it's always going to be a bigger challenge because when an agent in this agency wants to promote or advance, they 90% of the time or more have to move, which leads me to the next slide, Joe. So overall, we have agent gender, and as you can see, law enforcement has always been a male majority profession, but as you can see here with the commission, we do have where overall for enforcement, we have 84% of our folks are male and 16 are female. In this last academy, we got it up to 20% female and 80% male for that academy alone. Part of the challenges that I mentioned earlier are part of what's ongoing for our recruitment. Many times the female in the household is not the biggest wage earner, and we've had instances over this last two academies where we've had excellent female candidates that just simply cannot take the job because it's going to require the entire family moving for her hiring. And so here recently, I was talking to General Nettles about it, but we're facing even a greater crisis in the sense that those females that we do currently have on board aren't trying to promote. Many of them I know have the greatest capability of promoting, but many of them are not trying to promote at this time because it would involve the moving of their families to another part of the state. So we will continue along with human resources to try to mitigate and help some of those situations as best as we can. Next slide. And then lastly, as far as demographics go, we want to say that the recruitment of military veterans for us, for TABC, is highly desirable simply because of their service mindset. And as you can see, overall in enforcement, we have 24% that are veterans and 76% that are not. But during this last academy, as you can see, our HR department did an excellent job, and we have, out of that academy class, we had 88% that were veteran and 12% that were not. So hopefully we'll be able to retain some of those folks. They do have a wonderful service mindset that we're trying to perpetuate here at TABC. Next slide. Okay, here you have our use of force policy. Recently, obviously, as I mentioned at the opening, we have had some unfortunate incidents across the nation that have been videotaped. In 2010, TABC shifted from a use of force continuum model into a totality of circumstances and objectively reasonable model. The use of force policy name changed to response to resistance. The policy also improved the tracking and record keeping of responses to these resistances. And so in this instance here, CPOs have a duty to respond only when resistance or a threat is encountered, but not necessarily to keep that old mindset of using force just because you feel like it's time to use force. Many of the examples to this are the types of responses that are deployed, the resistance and the threat encountered, the ethnicity and gender of the CPO, the ethnicity and gender of the age of the subject, the suspect, the reason for the response, the injuries to the suspect and to the officer afterwards, and medical treatment, of course, to be provided if necessary. And in order to fully document TABC's stance on the use of force, the following verbiage was added to our anticipated publishing of our use of force and response to resistance and perceived threats policy that we started back in June 2020. And to that verbiage we add, and that policy should be in its final approvals, Commissioner, so it should be pretty quick here that we do that. But the use of force by law enforcement personnel is a matter of critical concern both to the public and to the law enforcement community. CPOs are involved in numerous and varied human encounters, and when warranted, may exercise control over another in carrying out their duties. The Texas Alcoholic Beverage Commission recognizes and respects the value of all human life and dignity without prejudice to anyone. Vesting CPOs with the authority to use lawful, objectively reasonable force and to protect the public welfare requires a careful balancing of all human interests. So CPOs should recognize that their conduct prior to the use of force may be a factor which can influence the level of force necessary in a situation. That, nothing could be more profound than those statements added to our use of force policy. I've been in law enforcement now going on 29 years. And I will tell you that I have worked with other police officers that just seem to attract trouble, and then those that rarely ever have to get into an incident, a use of force incident with a person that we're dealing with. And one of the things that I can walk away and let you know that typically it's because the other officer eggs it on in some shape, form, or fashion, whether through attitude, through sarcasm, through comments made, which is why it's so important for us to make sure that our CPOs recognize that their conduct prior to the use of force may be a factor. Next slide. This is sort of an explanation of how a practical use of force should be in a totality of circumstances. The totality of circumstances model that we use exceeds the industry standards of implementing a use of force continuum. The continuum, which is the old way we used to do things, was basically linear. It focuses strictly on the subject's actions and not the circumstances surrounding those actions. For a simplified example, a stimuli response example, is that the subject produces a knife. According to the old continuum, and we call it old, but other agencies are still using this, the subject produces a knife, and in that continuum, the officer's response should be obviously one force or one grade above, which would be deadly force. But our new continuum, our new totality of circumstances takes into consideration that the agent should consider the age, gender, the size of the knife, and the officer having the opportunity to tactically reposition to gain an advantage over that suspect. And so that's a totality of the circumstances model, which requires officers to evaluate more than just subject actions. One of our fears when we implemented this model was that we were going to have the agents thinking too much and not reacting to the threat. So we, along with our training division, who's done a wonderful job, continually train on these things over and over so that it becomes second nature to our officers, so that they can think before they react to a threat scenario. Next slide. On these here, the math is going to be a little bit off simply because there was some outliers. For example, in 2016, we had one incident that involved two different people. So it was one incident, but it involved two different persons. I will say that I will show you these next this slide here, these two graphics, simply because I can say that in 2016, our TABC CPOs conducted 77,465 inspections, and there were 11 use of force incidents. That's 0.01% of all contacts made during fiscal year 2016. The national average for law enforcement use of force with all contacts is approximately 1%. 2017, we jumped to 84,312 inspections with 22 use of force incidents, and that was 0.02 of all contacts. The national average remained at 1%. And then in 18, we did 68,752 inspections with 15 use of force incidents. That's a 0.01 average as well, with the national average remaining at 1%. TABC is one of a couple of recognized agencies that has a use of force expert on staff. Our use of force expert is Albert Rodriguez. Albert is a nationally recognized use of force expert that frequently is asked to testify in excessive use of force cases. Most recently, he was scheduled to speak at the Texas Sheriff's Association conference on the use of force. Unfortunately, that conference was canceled due to the COVID pandemic. It should be noted that according to Albert Rodriguez, we have not had a single excessive use of force allegation made against one of our agents during this entire time period. One of the reasons that you do not see the 2019 statistics is that we're in the process of moving from a Lotus, an older system, into a newer system, and that work has not been completed on the transition over with that data. So I want to put this into perspective is that being that we deal with the predominant number of persons that we deal with have been consuming alcoholic beverages with lowered inhibitions, the fact that we have had no excessive use of force allegations and very minimal use of force necessary is a remarkable feat. It is definitely a testament to the professionalism of our agents and our method of operation being in 2012, when I became the chief, we implemented this undercover operation mentality, and it has proven to be very beneficial to these types of incidents that we do not have to get involved in, because basically sometimes they don't ever know we're ever there. Next slide. So the next slide is going to be our vehicle stop statistics. Yes, we do have cars that have red and blue lights and they have sirens. We don't do traffic stops, but we do conduct vehicle stops from time to time when necessary. I'd like to note, commissioners, that TABC is not required to keep this information, as we've been identified as an agency not being a primary traffic stop agency, but we keep it anyway. And the reason these statistics started being gathered was to combat racial profiling. I'm happy to report of all the vehicles that we stop, 44% of the vehicle stops in the past 18 months have consisted of motorist assists or CPOs assisting other agencies. The remaining 56 were conducted by TABC CPOs. That 56 of the total breakdown in agent ethnicity is above, and gender is above. I won't go through them in detail, but I will say that out of the 19 stops that were conducted, the gender, the ethnicity or race of the persons pulled over is equal between Hispanic and African American or white persons. I'm sorry, African American or black drivers are a very, very low percentage, and so we took the populations in these graphics from our census.gov for Texas, and so it is right in line with the population of Texas as to how we pull these folks over. And again, one of the examples, if the questions come, one of the examples that we can give about pulling someone over on a vehicle stop, it's someone has given alcohol to a minor at a convenience store that we were surveilling, and they leave, and so we'll pull someone over. Or if someone exhibiting signs of intoxication on the roadway, becoming a danger to themselves or others, we will conduct the vehicle stop. And so those are examples of what we do. We do not, and it is against policy to just do a regular traffic stop for a traffic violation. It's typically for public safety reasons that we will stop a vehicle. Next slide. So here we have, I spoke highly of our training division, and I will continue to do so. Since 2010, TABC has provided the latest training in advanced use of force and the duty to intervene courses offered by TCO. That's important, commissioners, because not only are our agents taught what not to do, they are required to report in a critical incident when they've witnessed another agency use force, and then of course they will intervene if they see another agency using excessive force. For example, one of our agents was working off duty on an off-duty job, and he witnessed a security guard place it, and this was after all of this had occurred in Minneapolis. He witnessed one of the security guards placing his knee on the neck of a suspect that had become combative inside of the location. Our agent immediately moved in and removed the knee of the security guard and reminded him that that's not the proper way to take control of a suspect. So anyhow, in 2017, TABC began to certify its own arrest and control tactics instructors, and these techniques are taught statewide. In 2019, civilian interaction training with an emphasis on de-escalation and training and tactical repositioning was taught to our CPOs. TABC teaches 7 different courses at the academy and in service to continue this type of education. I'm not going to mention them all, but I will say that one of the most important one is obviously TCOL course 1849. In that course, next slide, Joe. In that course, key behaviors and tips and techniques begin to diffuse critical incidents involving persons in crisis and move towards a safe resolution. Basic principles and concepts of crisis response using tactical communication and how to develop necessary skills to safely and effectively communicate during many critical incidents, and key active listening and nonverbal and verbal cues and skills that are especially valuable for diffusing tense situations. So if you'll notice, TABC is moving towards listening and speaking above and before acting. And so that's always going to be a good thing. In addition to these courses listed, training has implemented a unit of de-escalation and 15 additional courses that are taught to enforcement agents statewide during in-services across the state. And so within each one of those, there's always a modicum of some type of de-escalation that teaches the communication and the listening. And with that will end my presentation. If anyone has any questions.
Chairman, I do have one question, if I could be recognized.
Absolutely. Please proceed.
So I've looked at some of the sunset, I guess, the orders for the commission, and one of which was increasing some of the applications or employment for, I believe it's Asian and African American. I understand that through the slides, we're having trouble finding cadets, both for Asian and African American population. And I just wanted to ask, is there a plan or policy in place that we are implementing in order to remedy that gap? Because if our mission is to, make sure that we eradicate human trafficking, I mean, we'll need the assistance of individuals who understand how their communities work, speak that language, and understand how the evasion tactics are used. And I think that a large part in making sure we can meet that mission is filling out our quota with regards to those diverse applicants. So, you don't have to answer here. I just want to make sure that we're implementing either a policy or we're executing on a policy to meet the legislature's request to have that diverse applicant pool.
Yes, sir. No, absolutely. And we are working with HR. And we're working with training, Commissioner Mack. What we're trying to do is possibly begin our own BPOC, what they call a Basic Peace Officers course. This would allow us to train them from beginning to the end, but more importantly, it would allow us to go pick the fruit from the tree, much like FBI does, much like some of these federal agencies do, and they go pluck the fruit from the tree as they're graduating from college or junior college or even graduating from an academy. That would allow us to recruit a more targeted way to go to certain environments where we can target this type of cadet and candidate. Secondly, we're trying to, as we get better at what we do, our reputation in law enforcement circles, especially in the federal service, is changing for the much better, in the sense that it is definitely someplace you want to come work. And with, unfortunately, what has occurred with law enforcement across the nation in uniform services, I think that our method of operation, i.e. undercover, is going to become more and more desired by folks that still want to have that service mentality. They still want to be law enforcement officers, but we will offer them an environment where they don't have to go have a video camera shoved in their face every time they're trying to conduct business, because we're in there, we're working undercover, we detect our violations, and then we're back out. Our open team members then come in a little bit higher profile dress, but they come in and they serve the notice to the persons in charge of the location, and then we leave. There's not that much time for the antagonizing or the videotaping, and you still, with our focuses on these human trafficking issues and narcotics issues and organized crime issues inside our licensed locations, to me, it has become a more attractive option for those that still want to serve. And so we need to do one of those couple of things, is start pushing that. You don't have to go in uniform, come work for us, and then of course the plucking the fruit off of the tree and trying to get them from colleges and junior colleges directly. So
Right.
Yes, sir, we're trying to work on that.
Right. And to the extent, Chairman, if we're executing a plan, I think it makes sense for the commissioners to see that plan and to understand the breadth of that plan, so that we, from a commission standpoint, can understand the policy and hold staff accountable to the execution. Because, when I hear incidents of, we can't retain females because they're finding out that the job would require them to relocate, I think a lot of that is early on discussions, so that the applicants that we are getting understand what it takes to be an agent for TABC, so we don't have that back out, so we can actually make that checkbox and increase the numbers that we're trying to increase. Let's see the plan. I'd like to see the policy, so we can have check boxes with regards to execution. I had one second question. When you were going through the use of force slides, I'd like to understand the definition or the spectrum of use of force. Is this use of deadly force? Is this restraining? What is that spectrum? And because it's a broad term, and I just want to make sure that the data that we're looking at I want to be able to understand it on a granular level.
Yes, sir. Use of force in our critical incident reporting is basically anything that involves more than just command presence and verbal instructions. It's when you typically have to put your hands on someone because you've met some sort of resistance. So every one of the use of force incidents or reports that's on the chart for those years has been that we actively had someone trying to pull away from one of our agents. A use of force report, a critical incident report, does not have to be put together or submitted for someone that you tell, you know what, go ahead and turn around, place your hands behind your back. If they comply and the cuffs are on and off they go to jail, that would not precipitate the necessity for a report. But it would be anybody who you have to escalate past that. Any type of resistance, any active targeting of a suspect where you had to draw your weapon and point it at someone. And I think most recently, Captain Rodriguez has changed it, I believe now, to where even if you have to draw your weapon and hold it at a low ready position, I believe we've prompted our agents to start reporting that as well. That change has been very recent. So when we say use of force, it can be anything from that No, we have not had to use any kind of deadly force, thank God, here at the agency. So mainly on these uses of force that you see, they've been because we had to struggle with someone to arrest them, but nothing beyond the normal, having to struggle with someone, sometimes having to go to the ground to cuff them, beyond that.
Okay. So use of force is anything more than the simple verbal command. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And please get in contact with me, I guess, with all the commissioners with regards to the policy that we're putting together on the outreach to increase our diverse cadet pool. I'm interested to help and or assist and meet that threshold that the legislature has put on the agency. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other comments?
I'd like to echo Commissioner Mack, and I wanted just to say I also would like to lean into the discussion and also be used as a resource when you're looking at promoting women within the agency. We do have a different challenges when it comes to balancing career and family, but as Commissioner Mack said, I think there's some clear pathways that can be discussed early on, and want to be able to have, again, be used as a resource for the agency, talking kind of through these challenges and making sure that we've got promotions in place, as well as just different diverse voices at the table when you're talking about the agency. So appreciate the work. Thank you.
One of the things that I wanted to mention, Commissioners, Chairman Lilly, please, we've run into these issues for quite a while now, and I will say that there are at least 5 different times during the hiring process and recruitment process that we do speak to these potential cadets and explain to them what this agency is all about, what it entails, what kind of schedule they'll be working, and what happens when and if they choose to promote is going to entail. We do it at their test, at their written test that they take for the commission. We have a major or a lieutenant come out and speak to them there. We say it to them again when they come out for their physical agilities test. We say it to them when they come for their interview panel. We say it to them again when we are doing their background investigation. And then I say it again on the first few days of the academy to remind them of what this agency entails and the duties that will be required and these types of things. As a matter of fact, this last cadet class, I had a lengthy discussion with them, reminding them that if they had a mindset of promoting, that they maybe not stick their stakes too deep into the ground in whatever community that they were being placed in, so that they could understand that you might have to move. So you might have to uproot your family and move. So, we definitely try to let them know what it's all about, and we will continue to do so for sure. And we will get you what we're trying to put together for better recruitment. Thank you.
Any other comments? Yeah, thank you very much. As just to highlight, we are the third and have the third largest state police force in Texas. The crimes that are committed in licensed establishments range as sometimes as storefronts for organized crime with narcotics, human trafficking, money laundering. And so of the 40% of the employees of our agency are, he used the term CPO, which stands for Certified Peace Officer or Commissioned Peace Officer. So these are law enforcement officers that are very specialized in crimes that occur within our industry. And virtually 95+% of them have served in other law enforcement capacities, either as municipal police officers, highway patrolmen, and so on, or have served in the military. So they have a law enforcement background in more what you'd call traditional policing. But once they come, they have to go through our own academy in which they learn the code and they learn the specifics of crimes that occur around our industry. And so they're a highly, highly specialized police force, and which requires tremendous amount of training. You know, not unlike a military officer, of which I was, you realized pretty quickly that in order to be promoted, you had to move. And it can be very, very disruptive. I was a child, I was a dependent. My father moved every 3 years my entire life, and it becomes a challenge. It's a hardship for sure. And so we applaud our agents, the men and women in our agency that serve in our law enforcement capacity for the sacrifices that they make to the state and for what they're doing. And so while 40% of our agency are involved directly in law enforcement, the other 60% are involved in some of the issues that are being discussed later on in this meeting. That is audit, licensing, legal, government affairs, and dealing with all the challenges that are facing our industry right now. And I also want to mention, for those of you, again, that have never been in one of these meetings, there is a public forum, there is a public comment section. We are also going to deal with the reopening of the state and some of those issues later as we move through. So we appreciate everyone's patience. These can be sometimes lengthy meetings, but we have to follow a strict and legal protocol. And so thank you for those 376 participants that are on the phone. And so at this point, we are going to continue with our next agenda item, which is the update on the agency sunset compliance. Division Co-Director Morlock, if you please, ma'am.
Great. Thank you very much. My name is Marianne Morlock. I'm the Co-Director of Strategic Initiatives and Performance Improvement, otherwise known as SIPI. Thank you for the opportunity to visit with y'all today. The next commission meeting, you'll hear from the rest of Team SIPI, Amy Cardona and Amanda Collins. We'll talk to you about the status of the agency's compliance with all of the sunset recommendations and laws. And spoiler alert, it's good. Next slide, please. Today, I'm going to speak to you about one recommendation adopted by the Sunset Commission to evaluate and address gaps in our rules. More specifically, they wanted us to adopt rules, review existing rules, and identify laws or rules that need more explanation. So in the next 3 slides, I'll break down these 3 items. Next slide, please. Excuse me. First action is to adopt the rules based on the sunset recommendations as well as the new laws generated by the session. And there were a lot out of sunset. So in November, Co-Director Cardona briefed you on the information that is on this slide. And just to sort of cap it all off, within 6 months of session, we had developed a plan for adopting the rules necessary to meet all statutory requirements from the session. Also want to make a little disclaimer here that I say we a lot, but please know that we realize the commission, not SIPI, not anyone else on staff, decides which rules to publish and adopt. We do the work necessary to recommend rules to you for consideration, but we're where you are the decision makers. So please forgive the we and recognize our understanding. So back to the 24-month weekly plan that I was talking about. It covers fall of 2019 through fall of 2021. And all the drafts, excuse me, all draft rules are published on board docs, just like this commission meeting, at least 2 weeks before a stakeholder meeting. And people can participate via a web like we are now, as well as in person once we're able to do so again. So each step in the process, from drafting to review by our internal rules committee, to executive approval, to stakeholder meetings, all that is on a flow chart, and we have it documented in our procedural documents. And the intent is for any rule that comes before the commission to go through this process. And at a minimum, that means it's going to take 11 weeks for a rule to be put on the agenda for y'all to look at. For example, and some may take a lot longer. One example is there are some rules up today in Chapter 33 for licensing. We started on those in January. So this plan is also quite flexible. Didn't know how flexible it needed to be, but it was put into place last year, obviously before the pandemic. So we have been able to adjust. Staff has maintained the same schedule. It has made a difference in the rules that are introduced to stakeholders, to the industry at the moment, just because of the challenges that they're facing. But the commission is still on track to meet all statutory deadlines. Next slide, please. should do mine. So to recap, the second action in the recommendation was to undertake a comprehensive review of the rules. There are about 200 rules, and almost 70% of those were impacted by actions of the 86th legislature. Again, primarily from the Sunset Bill, but that's a lot. So, and there are a lot of different effective dates in the Sunset legislation, and based on that and a lot of other factors, some of the rules were done in 2019, but the bulk will be done in 2020 and 2021. And there's some rules that are very simple, could be a copy and paste. So we've got beer and ale throughout the rules. That will change to malt beverage, but that won't take effect until next September. And then some rules need to be repealed because they're obsolete. Some are time sensitive. So, but regardless, they all have to be reviewed every 4 years. That's a mandate of all state agencies, not just TABC. So we took the plan that I described previously to address everything that happened in 2019 session and expanded that to all 200 rules, and as to when they'd be drafted, reviewed internally, how many stakeholder meetings, and then when we would present it to y'all for publication and consideration. Excuse me. And that plan would complete review of all 200 plus rules by the end of 2022, which sets us up in 2023 to review the rules 4 years previously that were promulgated in 2019 as a result of sunset. So good timing. But regardless of when the review occurs, now is the perfect time to reorganize and to put them in a more logical order, review them so that anything that's not supposed to be there isn't there, update everything that we can, logical order, and then also add some consistency. You'll see in the rules today, there are general provisions, maybe definitions at the beginning of every chapter, and in some cases at the beginning of subchapters. So you'll start to see a consistent look and feel to all of them. But also know that if a rule can be repealed, we'll repeal it. The intent is not to create more rules, is to create an appropriate structure, and of course, content based on input from industry and the law. And just one example, today you have product registration rules, chapter 45 in front of you. It started out 53 rules in 3 subchapters, and now it's 25 rules in 5 subchapters. So we cut the number of rules in half, expanded another number of subchapters, again, to create that consistent organizational structure, but cut the number of rules in half. Next slide, please. So the third action from Sunset was to identify regulatory requirements and processes in need of additional clarification or explanation. So last year, SIPI recognized that marketing practices advisories, which are authorized in the Alcoholic Beverage Code, are great tools and provide a lot of clarity to industry on different activities. But unless the advisory is commensurate with law, it can do more harm than good. So a group of subject matter experts set out to look at those 63 advisories. In fact, some of which haven't been reviewed in 15 years. 25% were last updated 15 years ago. A lot has happened in 15 years. We've gone through 2 sunset cycles in those 15 years. So they reviewed the advisories and determined that 28 require no substantive changes other than to update the look and feel, use a new template. Like Chairman, we got rid of the crayon logos. We got to update that on a bunch of them. And then 12 will be repealed and 23 will be amended. So a plan was developed, another plan, that covered May 2020 of this year through April 2022. And there's a plan to look through those. It's much like rulemaking. We outlined when they would be drafted, when they go through internal review, and when they would have stakeholder input. And excuse me, but advisories are just one way that we can meet the sunset action to provide additional clarification. Another is if staff or industry recognize a rule that's confusing, difficult to understand, cumbersome. For example, there's a rule that's about 2.5 pages long in your rule book. So I hope at the next commission meeting, we will present you a new set of those rules that are organized in the structure that I mentioned previously and much easier to understand and to follow. And then in some cases, we have those 63 advisories, but we may need a new one. Like after session, a law was passed to initiate a consumer delivery permit. There are a lot of questions around that. How is it going to work? And so we put an advisory together and issued that in December of last year after session to answer a lot of those questions. In some cases, out of those 63 advisories, there may be some information in there that is more appropriate in a rule. So that change will be made as we're reviewing that particular set of rules. And then also we have a parking lot list or wish list. So when something comes up during a stakeholder meeting or during a discussion with staff, we'll make a note of an item that needs to be changed or needs additional clarification and make sure that we address that when the time is right. Next slide, please. So SIPI does a lot of training. I'm sorry, not of training, a lot of planning, a lot of analysis, but we depend on the guidance from executive leadership, the expertise from the subject matter experts, legal advice from the rules attorney and others to make all these plans that we come up with a reality. So I appreciate the support that staff gives us, and I welcome any of your questions.
Having heard no questions from the commission, we're now going to move to the next item, which is an update on the agency's reopening. HR Attorney Joe James. Mr. James?
Good morning, everyone. Chairman Lilly and commissioners. I'm Joe James. I'm an attorney with the Human Resources Division. I'm here on behalf of our HR Director, Amanda Fletcher. Today, I'll be updating you on the agency's plan to reopen TABC offices to the public. That's the limit of what I'm talking about. Can I have the next slide, please? The TABC offices have been closed since March 20th. TABC stands ready to implement the first phase of reopening our offices to the public when the executive director determines it's the best time. Senior leadership is coordinating with the governor's office and state health officials to ensure the timing of our first phase of reopening is in line with their recommendations and best practices. Next slide, please. Director Fletcher briefed you in the last commission meeting on how we developed the phased approach to reopening TABC offices to the public. Recall the executive director formed a work group to develop protocols and guidelines for reopening TABC offices to the public with the objective of protecting the health and safety of all Texans, especially our employees and the citizens we serve. The work group developed a three-phased approach, but the timelines of each phase have yet to be determined. The first phase is reopening our regional offices and headquarters to the public by appointment only. Headquarters will serve as the pilot before opening the other regional offices. The second phase reopens the remaining area offices and uses a staged approach at HQ to return to standard operations. The third and final phase would return TABC to normal standard operations or some variation in a new normal. As Texans move through the process of safely and strategically reopening the economy, TABC will continue to adapt these plans in a fluid environment and in accordance with direction from the governor's office to ensure that we are doing the best we can to protect the health and safety of all Texans, especially those who are most vulnerable to COVID-19. Next slide, please. We continue to adapt to the changing environment. Face coverings were previously encouraged while in a TABC facility, but not mandatory. In line with the governor's recent order, we are now requiring that employees wear face coverings while in a TABC facility if they are unable to maintain a 6-foot distance from others. Earlier this month, we distributed a COVID-19 acknowledgement by email through the communications team with information and expectations for employees about appropriate precautions to take while operating under the coronavirus conditions, and also required employees to acknowledge receipt of the information through our My Policy system. This was intended to be a reminder so that fatigue doesn't impede our safe operations. All non-essential travel has been suspended. Any civilian travel and all overnight travel requests must be approved by the Chief of Staff. Enforcement personnel are not restricted from traveling in state vehicles, but must seek approval to travel overnight. In summation, we continue to make minor adjustments to our operating standards and look forward to fully implementing our reopening plan. I'm ready for your questions.
All right, any other questions or comments? Mr. James, thank you very much for that update. We will now move to the next agenda item, which is briefing on the COVID-19 financial impact. Director Graham.
Good morning. My name is Thomas Graham. I am the Director of Tax and Marketing Practices for TABC. Chairman, Commissioners, thank you all for having us this morning and for letting me present this to you. Today, I'll be presenting a short overview of the pandemic's impact to our excise, tax, and licensing revenue collections. Next slide, please. First, let's look at our excise tax collections for this fiscal year through June compared to the same time frame in FY19. Excise taxes are generally paid by the wholesale and distributor tier when they sell product to retailers. Manufacturers that have the authority to sell direct to consumers and retailers are also required to pay excise taxes. In an effort to ease the financial burden on the industry, our leadership allowed qualifying industry members to defer their excise tax payments until the end of this fiscal year. This extension helped those members hold on to their cash for a few months, making it possible to pay salaries and other bills while they restructured their operations. Extensions were granted based on a set of criteria developed by our audit division. The criteria included things such as the permittee's tax payment history, average monthly payment amounts, and their violation history. As of last month, excise tax collections overall were down 10% as compared to FY19. The anomaly in that was our beer collections. They were actually up 3.5%. But in contrast, distilled spirits saw a 25% decrease. Wine saw a 9% decrease, and ale and malt liquor fell by 1%. And keep in mind, the majority of the tax exemptions were granted to businesses that sell wine and spirits. So I expect the majority of these tax extensions to be paid in full by the end of the fiscal year. We'll have the full impact as far as taxes at the next commission meeting once we get in our fiscal year totals. Any questions on these tax numbers? Next slide, please. Licensing fees and surcharges are TABC's second largest source of revenue collections. Last session, the legislature granted alcohol delivery authority to nearly all retailers. As a result, most retailers can now deliver alcohol to consumers using their own staff or by using third-party consumer delivery permittees. Mary Ann touched on those earlier. Those changes, along with the governor's recent waivers allowing mixed beverage permittees to sell to go, have helped many businesses continue to make sales, even though they may be required to be closed for on-site dining. Since the beginning of March, the licensing division has been working tirelessly to expedite applications from businesses adapting delivery and to-go operations. These numbers reflect our licensing collections as of June of this year as compared to FY18. The reason we're comparing FY20 to 18 versus 19 is that our permits are issued on a 2-year basis. When Texas went to a 2-year licensing period, many of our business renewals were spread out so that the majority renewed every other year. Therefore, to get accurate comparisons when we're looking at licensing revenue, we have to compare on an every other year basis. So currently, as of June of this year, licensing collections are down 6% overall. Wine and beer permits were down about 6.5%. Liquor permit fees were down 1%, and temporary permit fees were down 11.5%. The temporary permits are going to be all the canceled festivals and events, in parks and things like that. So those fees, of course, are down a really good amount there. Any questions on those numbers? Next slide. So in sum, COVID continues to impact the Texas hospitality industry and the agency's collections. Unlike tax collections, we won't know the full impact to licensing collections for several years, especially with regard to how many businesses are forced to shutter their doors and not renew their permits. One thing we can say for sure, TABC will continue to work with the industry and the state's leadership to provide guidance and develop innovative solutions to support Texas businesses. And that's my presentation, short and sweet. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Graham, thanks very much. We are going to actually go back to report 2.5, which is the survey of employment engagement results. So that agenda item will now be on the floor. A briefing of the survey of employee engagement results. HR Attorney Joe James will return to the dais. Mr. James?
Chairman Lilly and Commissioners, I'm still Joe James, HR Attorney. Next slide, please. TABC conducts the survey of employee engagement in order to gauge employee morale and attitudes that may impact the agency's effectiveness. The agency's largest investment is in its people. This survey gives leadership on all levels additional information about the ongoing success of that investment. A copy of the survey results is being provided to you. You'll see that the survey was conducted between March 18th and April 17th of this year. The survey is a product of a collaboration between TABC and the Institute for Organizational Excellence, which is a part of the Steve Hicks School of Social Work at the University of Texas. The Institute provides the base product and analysis, and TABC adds its own questions. As a Texas agency, the Institute has particular experience with this type of analysis of state agencies, so it offers more useful information and an advantage in cost to the agency and to the taxpayers. The Institute has performed previous similar surveys. The most recent occurred 2 years ago. And this is useful because it allows us to identify trends and see how well TABC has addressed the weaknesses that our team identifies. To the extent the agency continues to see value in the survey, we would expect to again conduct it 2 years from now. This will give us an additional data point by which to measure this particular type of progress. The survey consists of a set of questions that are included in all of the Institute surveys of state agencies. This is followed by a set of specialized questions developed by TABC. 82.5% of TABC employees participated in the survey. This was an improvement of 3 percentage points over a previous survey. In addition, the survey evaluates employee engagement with a standard Gallup 12-question battery. While this ideally shows 50% or greater in the 2 most engaged categories, the Institute recognizes the practices of law enforcement agencies are incongruent with these questions. TABC had 42% of its employees in the 2 more engaged categories. Next slide, please. The survey groups questions that relate to similar concepts as constructs. The 3 constructs that scored the lowest were pay, internal communication, and employee development. All 3 of these topics were priorities on which leadership has already been working. Communications, including internal communications, has been prioritized, and it is now being led by Brian Black, who has had specific success in this area. Similarly, the topics addressed under the employee development construct are now the responsibility of the training division, with the intention of placing more emphasis on these. Pay continues to be a challenge, and it's a challenge that is largely outside of TABC's control because it depends on action of the legislature. In 2019, the agency sought to address this, but the legislature only approved a portion of our request. This is clearly one of our biggest challenges in attracting and retaining the caliber of employees needed to serve our clients. While some economic forces may work in our favor temporarily, we can't reasonably expect that to remain the case. At present, our staff are preparing to again ask the legislature to help us to ensure that we are able to reward hard work, and talent. The 3 high-scoring constructs were strategy, supervision, and workplace. These reflect relatively high confidence in the agency's strategic direction, which is particularly pleasing to see. The agency has refocused its mission at the direction of the legislature, the governor, this commission, and the executive director. With many of our employees having been with the agency more than 10 years, it is good to see folks embracing this. The supervision construct focused on immediate supervisors and middle management. With an agency spread across a large state, these leaders are the backbone of TABC's operations. Going forward, we will need them to continue to have the confidence of their team as we take on new challenges. This is also an area that the agency has emphasized under General Nettles with our partnership with TEACS in developing the TABC Leads program. This focus on strengthening our leaders and those with leadership potential, this focuses on. The training program is centered around teaching the leadership behaviors of communication, recognition, empowerment, and work-life balance. Finally, the workplace construct focuses on the sufficiency of equipment and workspace. Next slide, please. Again, one of the advantages of this test is that it gives us the opportunity to look at trends. The page above shows how the scores on each of the constructs has changed since the last survey. Note that other than pay, the 2 low-scoring constructs, employee development and internal communications, were markedly improved since the last survey. In fact, only pay shows a decline. That concludes my presentation. I'm ready for your questions.
Commissioners, any questions? Mr. James, thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for the slight confusion in the order, which sometimes happens in virtual meetings. We will now move to 2.7, which is the next agenda item. It will be a briefing on the 5% biennial budget reduction plan with Director Mayo. Ma'am, you have the floor.
Good morning. Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Lilly. Commissioners, for the record, my name is Vanessa Mayo, and I'm the Chief Financial Officer for TABC. Today, I will be presenting on 2 different topics, the first being the 5% biennial reduction plan, and the second will be a high-level summary on our agency's legislative appropriations request, which is also affectionately known as the LAR, which I will refer to it there throughout. Next slide, please. All right, on to the 5% reduction plan. The initial letter to agencies was received from the Office of the Governor on May 20th. The direction to agencies and universities was to complete a plan for a 5% reduction in GR and GRD appropriations for the current biennium, so FY 20 and 21. Please note TABC currently has no GRD accounts, and all of our reductions were taken from general revenue. Reductions were categorized and submitted in priority order from least to most detriment to the agency and its mission. Agencies were instructed not to submit a single item or across-the-board reductions, and were asked to detail the effects, if any, that these reductions would make on revenue collections or performance measures. Next slide, please. So what does a 5% reduction look like for TABC? For us, it's nearly $5.6 million cut, unfortunately, in FY 21. With the governor's direction received in mid-May, most FY 20 funds were already committed. This forced us to take the cut mostly out of fiscal year 21. The majority of the reduction was realized by instituting a hiring freeze, and this totals about $2.2 million. Total FTEs affected for this would be 39 FTEs or employees. Other large reductions were taken from law enforcement equipment, travel, fuel, capital projects in IT, and other miscellaneous operating expenses. Operating expenses is a huge category for things like insurance premiums, temporary services, furniture, maintenance, etc. Next slide, please. This slide outlines the categories and the dollar amounts where the reductions were proposed. Again, these items are listed in order causing the least to most detriment to the agency and our mission. So given a choice, we would start with sacrificing number 1, credit card fees, and then move on down to the list. Note these reductions include a complete hiring freeze, the elimination of new vehicle purchases for FY21, and a large reduction in fuel and travel. Next slide, please. In summary, the total reduction plan for the agency equals about $5.6 million in FY21. The reduction would be taken from 16 different items and would affect all strategies of the agency. The hiring freeze, again, would constitute the larger dollar amount saved and would be about $2.2 million and affect 39 FTEs or 39 vacancies. Are there any questions on the 5% reduction plan?
I've got one question, sorry. Has this plan already been implemented, or is this plan just being presented and we're waiting for feedback before we actually implement?
So this was just a plan, a proposal that we were asked to submit again towards the end of May. It was submitted electronically in the LBB's database, the Legislative Budget Board. So it was a formal proposal in that sense. However, it's still being called a plan. We have not heard anything to date, so I am on pins and needles waiting to hear from the LBB. We have not received our base number for the LAR, which I will talk about here in a second, and we have not received any more guidance on what to do with this plan. LBB did have a board meeting last week. There's a lot of discussion of a 5% reduction, and I think that is at a minimum coming. And with that, we will have to kind of adjust and see what our LAR number is going to look like and what our request will be for 22-23. But again, this is a plan that we put together, we proposed, we have not received feedback to date.
So with that though, knowing that this plan's been submitted and it's likely the biggest number there is the salary freeze, has that been implemented thus far, or are we still looking to fill positions? Executive
Director Nettles has asked that we do an internal hiring freeze. So to date, every position that becomes vacated has to be approved by him as the executive director. We, as directors, would have to prove this is an important position and this is why we need to fill it. So currently there is an internal hiring freeze. Several years ago, the governor did institute a statewide hiring freeze, and that was mandated. We were forced to do that. Currently, it is just internal. So there's a lot of discussion, out there with different agencies, what they think is going to happen. But to date, we haven't received anything formally, no formal notification.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the reduction?
I have a quick comment, 2 quick comments. Thank you, Vanessa, for addressing this with us today. So I'm just wondering, on the employee tuition reimbursement program, is that part of kind of the employee package, the incentives that we offer currently? And I'm wondering, by taking away that number, how does that affect on the chart that we just saw with HR on the employee engagement and being happy within the company? I don't know if you can address that. And then the second part is with the new agents that we were able to graduate, the new 25 agents, does this budget have anything to do, does that affect them when it comes to vehicles or any of the investments that we were able to make with them?
So again, it's a plan, so it hasn't affected anybody yet. The tuition reimbursement program is something that we started several years ago. It's been in place for about 10 years now, I would say. And this is for current employees who have been with the agency at least 6 months. And it's an added benefit that TABC offers. So this is not part of their state package or ERS benefits, so to say. As an employee with TABC, if you were working on a college degree, whether it's associate's, bachelor's, or master's degree, that is relative to your job duties, we offer tuition assistance in the form of a reimbursement. So employees are allowed to apply before their semester begins. And once they pass and they provide information that they've passed their course, and they are in good standing with the agency, and they submit their reimbursement, it's vetted by HR, and then my staff issues a reimbursement for those folks. And every year we've had about a $10,000 budget for that. And sometimes we exceed that. Sometimes, we don't even spend that much. It just depends on the interest from employees. But unfortunately, with a budget cut, this is one of those things that had to go. But again, this is a proposal and nothing's been formally announced yet. And I'm sorry, you asked about vehicles as well, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so vehicles, we've purchased vehicles for this year. We had, because of our additional FTEs that we were appropriated in this last session, we were able to purchase more new cars. So we've already done that. We're still waiting for deliveries on some of those vehicles. This cut would only affect new vehicles for FY21. So in the last several years, we've gotten about $700,000 each year appropriated specifically for vehicles, mostly law enforcement vehicles. And this cut, if were to come to fruition, we would cut new vehicles purchased for next year. So our new agents are outfitted and everybody has a car to date. What would happen is essentially we wouldn't be able to replace them at the 100,000 mile mark as we've been doing. So agents would be driving older vehicles and our maintenance costs may go up as a result.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions for Director Mayo? All right, we'll now return to Director Mayo with agenda item 2.8, which will be a briefing on the legislative appropriation request for FY 2022 and 2023. Director Mayo.
All right, thank you. So next up, I will present a high-level summary on the agency's LAR, again, our legislative appropriations request, and specifically, I will cover our exceptional items. Next slide, please. So as discussed, our LBB policy letter, which essentially is our direction from the LBB on how we are to base our budget for the next biennium, has not been made available. As I mentioned when Commissioner Atkins had some questions, the LBB had a meeting, I believe it was last Monday, and there was a lot of discussion about revenue estimates and the change because of the economy being affected by COVID-19. Comptroller Hager presented, and there was strong discussion about a quote unquote belt tightening session for next year. So I do believe there will be a 5% cut at a minimum requested, but again, we're still waiting to hear from them. Usually at this point of the month, I've already had my number, but unfortunately to present to y'all today, I just have estimates. So we are estimating that our LAR will be due mid-August. We anticipate that the baseline request will be told it cannot exceed amounts from 2020. And most agencies are normally asked with exceptional items to be prepared to identify cost savings to offset any requested exceptional items. A zero-based budget may be requested or strategic fiscal review. Again, there's a lot of talk about that in the board meeting with the LBB as well. And a zero-based budget essentially means that we would start with zero and justify every expense that TABC would need. Please note that in 2018, prior to the last session, we did complete strategic fiscal review at that time. So we may not be asked to do another one with such a short time, but we are prepared to do so if asked. Next slide, please. So again, these base request numbers are estimated as we have not received our number from the LBB. The numbers contained are estimated based on our current appropriations for 2021. And I will say I did not account for the 5% cut in these numbers, again, because that was proposed and we don't know if that's going to be final or not. The agency's LAR will include 6 exceptional items, which will total approximately $12 million over our base budget. The first 2 items are related to our current AIMS projects and the need for user licenses and ongoing support for that large IT project. Number 3 is a request for 26 additional agents for human trafficking efforts in our law enforcement division. Number 4 is to fund a reclassification for commissioned peace officers on Schedule C, and this would help us with our recruiting efforts and things that Mr. James talked about earlier in the presentation. Number 5 is for cybersecurity, kind of self-explanatory. Please note that the cost included in number 5 is not for any relative FTEs, but just professional fees and programming that we're requesting to make our systems more secure. And the last item here is to continue funding for CAP support. CAPS is a statewide mandated financial and personnel system that every agency is slowly moving towards. We first went onto it in 2017, and we've asked for ongoing support for that. It has been funded in the last 3 sessions. However, it has not been included in our base as a permanent funding. And again, until I get my number, I don't know what the LBB will recommend, but on the safe side, we're requesting that funding one more time. Next slide, please. In summary, again, I keep emphasizing this point, the LBB has not published the LAR instructions or a policy letter for 22-23 submissions. Budget reductions are possible due to COVID's effect on the economy and the revenue estimate that Comptroller Hager has just released last week. The agency is requesting 6 different exceptional items totaling about $12.2 million and for 35 FTEs for the biennium, or for FTEs or original more staff. The total estimated GR request for the agency after our exceptional items would be $113 million over the biennium and 706 FTEs. That concludes my presentation on the LAR. Are there any questions?
One quick question. You know, going into this session with the 5% reduction, what do we gauge the appetite on exceptional items, given that we're under this kind of holding pattern? Generally, you know, what I've noticed in these scenarios is exceptional items are a lot harder to request when they're asking for cuts. I wanted to see if you could kind of expand on that.
So it's very hard to tell with a legislative session. Would be my 4th or 5th now since I've been in budget. And every year I think something's going to happen, and sometimes it happens the complete opposite. So it's very difficult to predict the behavior of the legislature. I will say with a proposed 5% plan and possible 5% cuts, exceptional items will be more difficult to attain. So that's why it's important for us to stick to our mission and basically tell our story as to why we need this funding. I wish I had more information for you, but unfortunately, you know, it just depends.
The guidance out to date hasn't required additional identifiers or explanation with regards to special items?
Not yet, no. So again, we're about, I would say last session, we knew by the 19th what our LAR number would be. And here we are the 28th and still have had no guidance. I think the LBB is struggling with, you know, new staff. They have a new executive director. They also have to update all their programs to reflect if there will be a budget cut and then what instruction there will be. Last session, we had a 4% budget cut, and we were told to cut wherever we saw fit as long as we made the GR number that they gave us, with the exception of our border security funding. So we were exempted from that. In the previous guidance, TDM, parts of DPS, HHSC, other folks were exempted from the 5% plan, and we were not. So it just depends on what guidance we get from the governor's office and what, in the end, the LBB tells us. So unfortunately, I've been worried all weekend waiting for a number so I could have a better update for you. But unfortunately, I'm at the mercy of the LBB and their guidance. And again, in my experience, we would have had a number by now. But unfortunately, things are just very strange considering the current economy, and just generally COVID has kind of put everybody on their ear.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Mack. Any other questions? All right, we'll move to item 2.9, which is an update on the agency's public website redesign. Director Mosley and Director Black.
Good morning, Chairman Lilly, Commissioners. My name is Retta Mosley, for the record, Chief Information Officer for the agency. And I'm going to do a very quick update for you on the overall technology transformation project. It is a $9.9 million funded project where we're covering 3 major projects. They are on time, I am very happy to say, and on budget. And for the record, it is Alcohol Industry Management System is our largest cradle to grave project. We are in progress development, and we should be seeing demos hopefully to you all in this fall. at the latest, and then they will be throughout the year with a go live target of 9/1 of 21. Our underlying project is Enterprise Data Solution. It's a whole new data infrastructure that we are building inside Google Cloud Platform, as I've told you in previous meetings. And we had a quiet go live on that, as there's no way to demo that particular feature and project that we're doing. And the third thing, which is what we're really excited about and here to show you today, is the public website redesign. We are scheduled for go live on it on 9/1 of this year. And I have with me today in tandem on this is Brian Black, our Director of Communications. And unless any of you have any questions for me specifically about the overall project, I'll be happy to turn it over to him.
Sounds like it's my turn, so I'll take it away from here. Thank you, Retta, so much, and Chairman Lilly and Commissioners. I appreciate you giving us the time to really talk about something that's going to be really special for TABC, a new tool that really is a game changer. So I'm going to ask if I could share my screen real fast, talk to the folks that are working with me on that. Just give us one moment here to change over. Here we go. All right. Hopefully all of you can see our new website, and I want to welcome to the Texas Alcoholic Beverage Commission website. And we really did a lot of research, and what stakeholders told us is they're not looking for rotating photos. They want clear, clean, responsive information, and that's what we're giving them right now. I want to first highlight what you see right here, this yellow bar. This gives us the opportunity to send information very quickly to any of our stakeholders. As soon as they get on the site, if they see an important notice up, if there's a new advisory that we need to get out on COVID-19 or some new guidance that we need to get, right there, you can get the information very, very quickly. So exciting to be able to do that. Next up, you're going to be able to see what we call our Mad Libs section. You may remember as a kid, you had the Mad Libs books where you would fill in little certain areas to put a story together. Or here, you're able to fill in information just like if I'm here as a new business owner, you can see you could be an existing business owner, seller server, community member. You choose exactly who you are as you come to the site. So it really tailors you to the site. Same thing here. If you want to select the action, you can click on it and you can see all the different actions that you can select. So let's say I am a new business owner and I want to apply for a new license or permit. Click on that, click over here, and immediately you can come to see the steps you need to take to be a license and get permits. A really step-by-step way to get the information. And again, that's what we're trying to do. We want folks to be able to come to our website and get the information quickly and easily. Again, let's say I'm a new business owner, and this time I want to find out about fees and surcharges. Let's say I'm trying to build my business model and I want to know exactly how much the investment is going to be. Quickly check that out. You can get to your fees, and immediately we want to be very transparent. There you can see all the different fees that you would have to be charged if you're trying to open a business. Again, just trying to get information to people as quickly as possible. One more I want to show you on this Mad Lib section. Let's say I'm an existing business owner and I really need to apply for a new license or actually renew my new license. Click on that. But let's say I can't remember what license I want to go to. So click on here, or what document I need to do. Give it 1 second. Hold on one moment. Don't you love these live opportunities? Well, unfortunately, we hit a little snag in the demonstration here. trying to get back on it, but it just doesn't want to get there. Give me one more second here. All right. Hopefully I've been able to give you a little bit of a glimpse of what we're trying to do here. I can tell you it's going to be something that we're going to be very excited about, something that is very special, that many people out there are going to be able to come to our website and really get great information on what they need to get as soon as possible. There's a news section, there's a social media section. There are different ways all over the website that you can get information. You can find your location very quickly. And it's something that really is going to be, like I said, a game changer for all of our different stakeholders out there. So on September 1st is when we're going to be launching this. It is going to be very special. One of the things that we're doing right now is we're actually working with industry leaders to test the website. We want to make sure that they're comfortable with this and we're taking feedback from them. And once we get that feedback, we will make some changes. We'll do a little tweak the here and there, and we'll really be able to have something very special. So I look forward to showing it to you all again in the future. And then definitely if you all want to do a test drive, we can definitely set it up with each commissioner so you guys can check it out. But again, on September 1st is when we'll be going live. So if there's any questions, happy to answer them. And again, I apologize that we had a little snafu there, but again, this is new technology that we're all going through when it comes to Zoom. And I can tell you once September 1st comes, we're definitely going to have a website that we all can be proud of.
Thank you, Brian. Any other comments from the commissioners or questions? All right, we are now going to move to public comment. As you can imagine, just through social media, regular media, there's been a continuum of comments regarding our agency, some favorable, some not. We understand there's tremendous frustration within this industry. We understand that people want answers today. We understand that businesses are suffering today. And so I can appreciate the frustration that everyone feels because it's not just in our industry, it's throughout. It's the commissioner's own businesses. It's our families, as I said earlier. And so we greatly appreciate all the comments that we receive. And believe me, I'm the first one to say, I wish we could answer every question immediately. I wish we could come up with solutions immediately. Unfortunately, the reality is that sometimes we can't. And so we are trying to make provisions as quickly as we can to be consistent with the law, which we are an enforcement agency in which we are tasked to enforce the law, not write the law, which I think is something that we need to all. But we very much appreciate and value the comments from industry because that's how we get better and hopefully can come to solutions that will enhance public safety, but also assist the industry that we are serving. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to public comments. If you wish to comment on any of these items, please use the chat feature. Detailed instructions for using the chat feature to comment are posted on our agency website. We'll now wait to see if any items are received, and I'm going to turn it over to our General Counsel, Clark Smith. So if you'll give us a couple of minutes as we assess the public comment section. Thank you for your patience.
Well, thanks, Chairman. Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners, and public members of the public. So as the Chairman indicated, we recognize that there is immense interest in today's commission meeting. We always welcome all of your comments and concerns. Under Texas law, our commissioners are limited to discussing items that are posted on our agenda. Those are the agenda items that my colleagues have covered over the last hour and a half. And in addition, due to time constraints, we need to limit comments to one per participant. We've had some great input so far, and so let me go ahead and read through some of the comments we've received, and they're perfectly, y'all are able to discuss these. We have a comment from Betty Bingham. Ms. Bingham writes, "Thank you for all your work on human trafficking. It is a paramount issue. We have two comments from Ms. Brianna Carmichael. Does TABC have any kind of community outreach with their officers to help avoid issues up front? We would like to meet the officers. She also remarks that the website is helpful. So I'll hand that over to the commissioners if there's any thoughts on community outreach for peace officers. I know we're always trying to make inroads there. It's certainly something I think that we want to continue to look at. I know that it's a priority of our commissioners. And if the commissioners have any thoughts on peace officer outreach, y'all can share them now. Obviously, if not, we'll take all of this under consideration. So relatedly, Lynn Magic asks commissioners for recruitment, perhaps look at a program to help the quote unquote trailing spouse find employment in the new market and offering competitive relocation packages. Chairman, as you indicated, the career relocation for peace officers is very challenging. And I think Lynn Magic's comment on assisting finding employment for the trailing spouse is very well put.
I second that, Clark. I didn't know if we could engage in the comment period. I know that it's an agenda item, but when that came in, I didn't want to slow down the meeting, but I think Commissioner, got her name. Your last name, Commissioner?
Marino.
Marino. I apologize.
Like Dan Marino.
There you go. She made a good point about, the policy needing to be collective. And I think those are the types of ideas that we need to kind of look at. What can we bring to the table that makes this a lot easier for individuals to be successful within our agency? So I think comments like that are great opportunities for us to kind of 3,000-foot view, put policies in place that are helpful. Anyway, so I appreciate the comment from the public. I have to say, I've been appointed, and throughout this entire time, it's been COVID. So I only know people virtually. So I apologize about names. I can't wait for the day that I get the chance to shake hands and actually introduce myself in person. So I apologize, Commissioner.
No apology needed.
Thanks, Commissioner. We have two very similar comments, questions from Jack Thompson and Jim. They ask, what are the estimates on the financial impact in dollars that the closures will have on the state due to lack of alcoholic taxes not being collected? I think it's hard to say. We had some projections from Director Graham and our Chief Financial Officer, Ms. Mayo. Commissioners, if y'all have any thoughts on those, but again, I know it's hard to pinpoint an exact number. Again, we know it's going to be difficult. It's oftentimes I think those numbers are known in hindsight, but can't be fully estimated in advance. And then share one more comment. This is from Guadalupe Brewing Company. They like the new website, which we are all very excited about the website and the potential it has to really assist our industry as well as just general members of the public. And I'll offer if anybody else has any questions or comments about agenda items, please feel free to submit them now via the chat function. To reiterate, we really do encourage and welcome comments or concerns through our website, our regional offices, or simply our online presence. We want to make sure that you guys have your concerns addressed and answered. And we will, we continue to work with the governor's office and with his strike force to address this COVID situation as best we can. Commissioners, if y'all have any other thoughts on the any of the public comments, otherwise I think we can wrap up this agenda item.
I have a quick comment, and and it's more for just clarification. Clearly, we have over 340 people watching us today, and a lot of the comments are dealing with issues that are not covered on the agenda. And so knowing that we want to be true to our mission and our message to be a transparent agency and to get the feedback of our clients and want to provide that customer service, can you address all the questions that we can't address here? How can we get communication out to the individuals that have posed some really great questions on the comment area? As I've been looking through them, I just think that if we can publicly say that, I know what it is because we say it every time we have this meeting, but clearly we have new people that have joined us today, and so if you could just give a clarification on how all of the other comments that we can't talk about today because they won't post it on our agenda, will they get feedback?
Yeah, can I, Commissioner Marino, I echo that. I've read all the comments that have come across, some very specific questions, very reasonable questions. And I know to some people watching, it can be frustrating in that if it's not on the pre-approved agenda, we cannot comment on it. However, they are reasonable and well thought out comments from literally hundreds of individuals. I've asked General Nettles to talk about that specifically. So General Nettles, can you comment on Commissioner Marino's question, please?
Yes, sir. So for all the comments that we're not able to address because of the notification requirement in the Open Meetings Act, I would direct them to encourage them to go to our website to submit them. What we typically try to do, if there is a way for us to identify who is asking or making the comment, we will try to respond to them. But if they make an anonymous comment, there's no way for us to figure out who they are or necessarily respond to them. So I would encourage them to go to our website, send the comments to us. Clearly, though, some of the comments that I'm looking and seeing, this agency does not make law. That's up to the Texas legislature. We also do not make statewide policy on the economy reopening. We're only focused on interpreting it for the alcohol beverage industry. There are some folks that have asked how they can find out what the latest is, and it's changing sometimes on a daily basis. Although the agency is closed down to the public, all our employees are working, sometimes Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, nonstop, to try to figure out how to help this industry reopen. I would encourage you to go to our website, sign up for the industry notification letter, and those updates that go out almost daily to the industry members, telling them what's changed, how we think they can safely open given the current governor's executive order. But again, that's not something, I know there are a lot of questions out there, and we're open to listening. We're open to solutions. If there are other states out there that are doing something different, please let us know. Happy to consider that. But again, we can't, because of the notification requirement, like Clark mentioned in the Open Meetings Act, if it's not on our agenda, it can't be discussed because the law doesn't allow us to do so.
Any comments or follow-up to General Nettles' comments?
Mr. Chairman, this is Jason Boatwright. We need to have an agenda item on our next meeting that allows us to address some of this. No, we don't make law. That's all true. We are enforcing laws that exist. That's true. But we do need to be able to speak to people whose lives are being severely challenged right now. I think that it's part of our job, and I think you agree, to take some heat sometimes, even if we're not the ones setting the policy agenda. We are enforcing them, and we need to be able to hear from the people we're regulating and we need to be able to talk to them. And I would encourage us next time to have an agenda item in which we can just take it. We can listen to people. I'm not going to set any policy. I'm not going to try to. I'm going to enforce the policies that are given to us. But I think it's extremely important that we have an opportunity in public to listen to people. Thank you.
Commissioner Boatright, well said. Thank you for those comments, as always. Any other commissioners at this comment before we move into the rules section?
I'd like to just, sorry, Commissioner Mack, echo the comments of the commissioners so far and of General Nettles that, again, we are an enforcement agency. We do not set law, but we are listening. We're seeing what we can do in the enforcement of the policy to help the agency. You saw earlier in the presentation that this does affect state revenue. This does affect our revenue. Your revenues affect our revenue. We want businesses open, but we have to do so in a safe manner and one that follows the policies that have been set for us. So anything that we can do to address your concerns, and if we can do so in a manner that makes sense in the next meeting, I fully encourage that. In the meantime, I know we as commissioners, I know that TABC is working tirelessly to address these concerns that are being presented, and I see comments that we're not responding quickly enough. I know that TABC personnel are working nights, working weekends to try to get as much information as we have possible to you, the clients. And we will continue to do that. So some patience is needed as we try to address this as quickly as possible, but know that it is all of our intention to safely reopen as quickly as we can.
I'll echo both commissioners, but I would like to say, yes, I agree. A special meeting to be able to hear and address some of these questions is appropriate. I'd also like to go out into my community and visit some of these restaurants and bars and talk to the owners, face to face. And I spoke with Clark, and I know we had a small outreach over the phone with some of our bars and restaurants during, I believe, phase 1 of the reopening, maybe towards the end of April. And I've asked for staff to expand that list, at least for the Austin area, of maybe 50 restaurants, bars, so we could go out and literally go out there face to face and show that, hey, we're listening. We want to know what's going on. What are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? And I believe someone said, take the heat. I think we have to do that. We have to go out there and be the face and understand that people want to be heard on this situation. And if we are the individuals to be first on the front lines, I think we need to do that. So I'd be very interested in having a meeting where we can put this on the agenda and address these questions a little bit more frankly, and look forward to doing that.
Thank you, Commissioner Mack. Anyone else?
I would just add not only the list of restaurants, but we also need to get the list of bars as well, so we can reach out to them.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, for those listening that aren't familiar with what we've done, so as commissioners, we have attempted, certainly starting in April with the shutdown, to reach out personally to license holder owners to discuss with them issues that they're facing, to try to continue to be as transparent as possible. Because as Commissioner Atkins said, it is not in this agency's best interest that businesses shut down. On the contrary, one of our prevailing themes is to support the businesses that we regulate and do what we can within the existing law to see that they thrive. We want you to be successful. And I know that's very hard to hear right now. And I know you probably think that we're lending a deaf ear in a time of crisis. I can assure you that we are not. And the notion that the tireless commitment that this agency is committing from every individual who have been working under tremendous pressure and stress to try to alleviate some of these problems, it is the truth. So we are going to continue to do what we can And we are going to take the heat because as appointed officials, that's part of our job. And it's not always a pleasant part of our job, but it's something that we all signed up for. And we greatly appreciate the frank, unfettered, as they say, leave the bark on comments that we've been receiving today. We're hearing it, we're reading it. I'm seeing it every 30 seconds, every 5 seconds. So with that, we are now going to move on to the rules section. Thank you for your patience, and we look forward to continuing this process. And thank you for all the commissioners for their tremendous suggestions as we move forward. So with that, we are going to move to the rules section. And the next agenda item is consideration and potential action on adoption of new rule 35.7, alcohol delivery compliance software applications. Ms. Horton.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. I'm here to talk to you about your rules that are up for adoption and proposal today. Item 4.1 is the adoption of new Rule 35.7, which regards the application requirements for apps that are used in the deliveries of alcohol under the new consumer delivery permit that the legislature gave us last session. We worked extensively with folks who are in the industry, who understand the business model, and people who develop apps to make a lot of changes throughout this rule process. And that work paid off because we did not receive any comments post publication. So it looks like we were able to address people's concerns and put forth a rule that works for everyone. It is now before you for your deliberation and decision on adoption.
Commissioners, any questions or comments? I move to adopt Rule 35.7 as recommended by staff. Is there a second to this motion?
I second.
Commissioner Atkins, thank you. I have a second. We will now vote.
My vote tab is not appearing.
Neither's mine.
All right, then we will take a voice vote. All in favor of adoption of new Rule 35.7 as recommended by staff, please say aye.
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 Any opposing? With no opposition, our votes have been received and recorded. The motion is approved.
Okay, on item 4.2, we are now looking at your proposals. Item 4.2 is proposal of a new subsection, a new subchapter of Chapter 33. This new subchapter would implement some new procedural requirements that the legislature gave us last session. Primarily, these are regarding application review and protests. Primarily, the changes are that protests will only come from external parties. It will no longer be staff-initiated protests. The agency is required to either deny or approve an application rather than protest it. An agency denial of an application would trigger certain due process rights. And all protests will move forward through the contested hearing process at SOA, and county judges will no longer be involved in that. It is a suite of rules, 13 rules, so it's one of our largest ones. We do have to have these adopted by the end of the year, December 31st of this year, which is why we're bringing it to you now. This is now before you for your decision on proposal.
Thank you. I move to approve publication of proposed new Chapter 33, Subchapter E, Rules 33.50 through 33.63 as recommended by staff. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Marino, thank you. I have a second. We will now vote. And let me know if your tab is not working, and we'll take a voice vote if necessary.
All have voted.
All have voted. Our votes have been recorded. The motion is approved. Please proceed.
Okay, item 4.3 is your second rule for proposal consideration. This came to us also out of the Sunset Bill. Essentially, what the legislature has directed the agency to do is adopt procedures that instead of the agency reviewing labels for new products, that we would instead accept the certificate of label approval that's issued by the federal government. That streamlines our process here at the agency, makes it faster, gets products to market faster, uses less time, not just of the agency, but also of our clients. And so it's greatly streamlines, as Marianne Morlock was telling you earlier. We cut the number of rules by more than half. And we also put them into a very user-friendly format and structure, which is the one that we're implementing across the board as we go through all of these rule changes. The way that we did this was to repeal several subchapters of Chapter 45 and then essentially start over because it was such a wholesale change in the way we're doing things. But the things that we need to keep, we've readopted. If there's anything else I want to tell you about this, we have to have these adopted by December 31st, 2020, again, which is why we are proposing now. The fee for product registration is going to remain at $25. That's where it's been since the late 70s, and we had considered increasing it just to help cover some of the losses from other areas. But instead, at this time, we're going to leave it right where it is in light of the challenging financial circumstances. We may have to revisit that at a later date once the economy starts to recover. But for now, we're leaving the fee the same. And that was the main issue of concern with the stakeholders we talked to. The other issue of concern was re-registering items that are already, products that are already registered with us under our old system. And we have worked with those clients to address those concerns and make that process even more streamlined and have no cost. So, this is now before you for your decision on proposal.
Commissioners, any questions or comments? I move to approve publication of proposed new Chapter 33. I beg your pardon, excuse me. I move to approve publication of proposed new Chapter 45, Rules 45.1 to 45.5, subchapters A through E, repeal of 45.1 through 45.96, subchapters A through C, as recommended by staff. Is there a second to this motion?
Second.
Commissioner Atkins, thank you. We have a second. We will now vote.
All have voted.
Motion carries. Our votes have been recorded. The next item is executive session. The commission will now go into executive session under Government Code 551.074 and 551.071. The regular open session of the Texas Alcoholic Beverage Commission will be in recess. The time is now 12:38 Central Time, July 28th, 2020. Thank you. All right, I'm going to give everyone a couple of minutes to get back out of executive session. So if you'll bear with me for about a minute longer. Okay, it appears that we have all commissioners present, and we have a quorum returned from our executive session. The Texas Alcoholic Beverage Commission has concluded its executive session and is now in regular open session. The date is Tuesday, July 28th, 2020. Time is 1:05 p.m. Central Time. Next is potential action on items discussed in executive session, and no action will be taken. Therefore, we will now move to closing item 6.1. Next is the announcement of the next meeting date, which is regularly scheduled for Tuesday, September 22nd, 2020. Commissioners, do you have a problem with that date? Having heard none, the commission is scheduled to meet on Tuesday, September 22nd, 2020, and we will obviously determine at that time if it will be virtual or in person. Next is adjournment. The time is now 1:06
Can I say
p.m.
something?
Oh,
Sorry.
you bet. Go ahead.
I just wanted to thank the TABC staff. Y'all did an incredible job again today briefing us, and you are working tirelessly. And I just want to say, especially to our presenters today, because I know we didn't have a lot of discussion, but it's not because we were not engaged. Y'all have done an incredible job. So I just want to thank Thomas and Joe and Marianne and Robert and Brian and Vanessa, Rita and Ms. Horton for really all of the work that you've done. So just thank you again, and General Nettles for leading this team. We really appreciate you.
Well said, Commissioner Marino. I echo that completely. Any other closing comments from any of the commissioners? All right. Well, thank you all very much, and we look forward to meeting in approximately 2 months. Thank you.